Hello everyone, and welcome to Simon's Book Club, where I'm going to be discussing some of the best books in neuroscience, psychology, consciousness, communication, relationships, mindfulness, and sharing ideas on healthy ways to connect with yourself and with others. In this series, I'm talking about How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. I started off with showing how the author undoes some of the misbeliefs about emotions which have been brought to us by some bad science. Emotions aren't universal, and not everyone feels anger, happiness, sadness, or any of the primary emotions. In parts 2 and 3 of the series, I went over the author's description about how we learn emotions as children and how we experience emotions as adults. In part 3, I talked about a very important concept for us to understand. We have a body budget of different resources, different hormones and chemistry that our brains allocate to different parts of our bodies. When we're feeling anxious or stressed or angry or sad, it's really our brain sending different chemicals to the parts of our body where we feel these emotions, and everyone feels a different combination cocktail of them. The big idea here is that we feel these withdrawals in our body budget through our interoceptive network. When we have butterflies in the stomach, or when we feel a gut response, or a phrase that I like to use whenever I drop my phone, when I feel like my heart fell out my anus. I use that phrase a bit too often. Our interoceptive network is our internal bodily sense, and our emotions are linked to this interoceptive network. Emotions feel like something, which is why they're often called feelings. So I'd like to go over a couple problems with emotions, and one of them is with the word feel. We can say that we feel bad or we feel scared, but this word of feeling has been, I think, kind of misused when we say stuff like, I feel like this president is going to bring us to ruin, or I feel that you don't value me. Here's why I think this concept is so difficult to understand. I feel that we don't have a set of terms that we all agree on. Now, in these two sentences, I use think and feel interchangeably, but they're very different words. I can feel the wind on my face, but I can't think the wind on my face. I went over this in my talk on nonviolent communication. When we use the word feel, we often don't describe what's alive in us, what our bodies are actually feeling. But instead, we are disconnected from ourselves, and we talk about our judgments of other people. These are thoughts, these are judgments, and they are usually confabulated after our bodies feel something, with little awareness or recognition about what's happening inside of us. We often attribute then the responsibility to others when we're feeling something on our own. The author gives a really great example of this in the book, one that is almost identical to something that I've experienced. So let me tell you a story. So I was dating someone a little while ago, and I wasn't really all too sure about our relationship. One morning, she sent me a very challenging text message, and my body didn't feel right about it at all. I felt queasy and anxious and just unwell. Before that message, I was thinking about breaking up with her, and when I felt how my body was responding after this text message, I told myself that I need to honor and listen to my body. The body knows. I won't ignore it anymore. When we met later that day to talk, my body felt really uncomfortable around her. I was having difficulty swallowing and just a sense of wanting to flee and go home. And so I knew in the pit of my stomach that this relationship wasn't for me. So I trusted my gut instinct and I broke up with her. You know, I was actually proud of myself for listening to my body and for honoring what it had to tell me. It was a moment of great strength and wisdom, I thought. And then I took an Uber home, which I had to pull over halfway through the drive so I could violently throw up the questionable salmon that I had for breakfast. Turns out that I found out the answer to an entirely different question I had earlier that morning. Is this salmon still good? It's past its expiration date. Should I still eat it? The answer was, Simon, no. That salmon isn't good, and I shouldn't have eaten it. I mistook my nausea and feeling of illness as an emotional feeling of unsafety, and I used those physiological sensations of getting ready to vomit as psychological justification for ending the relationship. And so here's what I think is a problem with listening to our emotions, with trusting our gut instincts, or when we let our emotions dictate our behaviors and our decisions. Our emotions are tied to our bodily sensations, and our bodies feel many similar things in vastly different situations and circumstances. Knowing how to tell one circumstantial emotion apart from some other dysregulation of your body is a challenge, and we're not as good at it as we think. Are you feeling anxiety? Or did you just have too much coffee? Or did you eat something rotten? Or did you hit that vape pen one too many times? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is E. All of the above. Bullshit, you might say. And honestly, this is sounding like I'm saying that anxiety is all made up. To which I'm going to ask, well, do you know that your anxiety is actually anxiety? Do you know the difference between anxiety and depression? Because here's the author's experience in the lab.
I asked a large number of volunteers if they felt anxious or depressed, using well-established checklists of symptoms. I'd done more complicated experiments as an undergraduate student, so this one should have been a piece of cake. Instead, it crashed and burned. My volunteers did not report anxious or depressed feelings in the expected pattern, so I tried to replicate a second published experiment, and it failed too. I tried again over and over, each experiment taking months. After 3 years, all I'd achieved was the same failure 8 times in a row.
8 times in a row, taking months of her life, 3 years of her life testing this out. The point here isn't that people don't feel anything at all and that it's all made up in their minds. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. What I'm saying is that our bodies feel lots of things, and the lines between one sensation and another is super blurry, and all can have similar manifestations in the body. And when we're wrapped up in our stories and our thoughts, and we don't give ourselves the space to process what we're feeling, or to be kind to our bodies, or to actually listen to what we're feeling with our bodies rather than just thinking with our thoughts, then we might apply emotional words to our sensations, to name our indigestion as indignation, and then to react in ways that don't align with our values and our goals. Listening to our emotions is similar to feeling a tummy ache and then getting angry at your girlfriend, or to feeling knee pain and then to thinking that the world's going to end. Don't listen to the knee pain. End times are coming no matter what, regardless of how your knee feels. It's true. We're all going to die. And this isn't just for me. Statistically, judges give out harsher verdicts before lunch when they're hungry. If you're about to stand in front of a judge, make sure you do so right after lunch, when you have a higher chance of them feeling better and happier and fuller, and them not confusing their anger with the gut instinct that you're guilty. Listening to our emotions is a lot more difficult when we factor in the concept of a body budget, which I mentioned before. Our brain is the control center for distributing all of these hormones and the glucose and the other chemicals throughout our body. When we feel emotions, our brains have withdrawn from our body budget and spent those resources on different parts of the body. But this budget isn't unlimited. We sometimes withdraw from the budget without doing the things that we need to do to replenish the body budget. And I'm going to tell you how to replenish the body budget in part 5 of this video. When our body budget is constantly being withdrawn from without enough time for it to recover, and it's out of balance, then our bodies are going to be in a regular state of not feeling all too great. Kind of like when you're in debt and you could barely make the interest payments. Or if the concept of balancing a body budget is new to you, you might have heard of it on Instagram before as regulating your nervous system and the challenges that come from being dysregulated. The point is, if our bodies aren't feeling too great, our emotions, which come directly from our bodily sensations, aren't really going to be aligned with our higher values as a result. It's hard to feel compassionate and connected, loving, peaceful, and present if we're hungover, or if we're in a pain flare-up, or if we're fatigued, or if it's right before lunch, or if we've been on a diet, because I know I get grumpy when I'm on a diet. I mentioned this in my talk on The Body Keeps a Score. Our minds and thoughts aren't separate from our bodies. Our minds are our bodies. And when our bodies aren't feeling well, then our thoughts will follow. I'm reminded of people who have alexithymia, which is a condition where people don't experience emotions, but just describe their experiences somatically, as in what their bodies are feeling. Instead of saying that they're angry or humiliated, they just describe what their bodies are feeling, like stomach pain or a flushing in the face. They can't perceive emotions in themselves, nor can they perceive emotions in others. Now, maybe I'm alexithymic myself. I'm not sure, but this to me kind of sounds more like a blessing than a curse. In much of the meditation practice that I've been exposed to, the instructions are almost to self-induce alexithymia so that we view our physiological sensations as closely as possible and don't apply any context or any concepts to them. And the argument there is, if we just examine the sensations, the emotions themselves will quickly pass. Here's Sam Harris, who is like my inspiration for meditation, sounding a bit like his meditation practice got him to be alexithymic as well.
Even if I was angry a moment ago, and then I wake up and notice, I'm getting angry, and I've, with just fresh attention, recognize the nature of mind in that moment, even before the anger has dissipated. It no longer has any implication. It certainly doesn't have a behavioral implication. It doesn't have a psychological one either, really. It's just like the feeling of indigestion or something. It just doesn't map back on to who I seem to be in that next moment. And so I'm free of it even before it disappears.
Meditation practice is one way of changing our relationship to our emotions, and it's often advertised as a tool to help you feel less anxiety. And from my personal experience, yeah, that's kind of 100% true, and it's been invaluable in my healing journey. And after reading How Emotions Are Made, I'm starting to understand the mechanics of how meditation works a little bit more. When I first got into meditation, I believed it to be the answer to all of my problems. And even though I find it immensely helpful and it's something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, I'm not convinced anymore that it's the only thing that I need. I don't see how meditation is going to resolve the issues of overdrawn body budgets, as dysregulated nervous systems are going to induce lots of sensations that we mistake for meaningful emotions. While we could change our relationship with these sensations, meditation seems to be a remedy of how to react to our interoception, but it's not really preventative of these sensations constantly emerging and challenging us to face them with mindfulness. And I think this kind of holds weight in the discussion between sudden versus gradual awakening, but that's a whole other level of woo-woo that I'm not going to get into. What I will get into, though, is that this book has a whole section on mastering our emotions so that our body budgets and interoception don't keep feeding us unnecessary signals that we mistake for emotions. And I'm going to talk about that in part 5 of this series, so check it out. And now we're halfway through this deep dive into how emotions are made. And I hope you're digging this video series so far. I really, really love this book, and I'm passionate about sharing the ideas in it. If you can't tell by now, I've done 4 whole videos on it. I'd like to spend this moment to thank the people who are supporting this project over on Patreon, who get exclusive updates on where these videos are going and early access to the scripts for these videos. If you like what I'm doing here, please join. Doing these videos and talking about these ideas is my dream job, and I'd love to make it sustainable. Your support would really mean a lot to me. If you want to get a head start for the book that we're doing in the next video series, we're going to be getting to Anil Seth's Being You, which is a gold mine of great ideas that really harmonize well with what we're reading right now. Until then, come on over to the Discord, where we discuss a lot of these ideas and more. I've really been interested in how Buddhism trains us kind of to manifest symptoms that are classically defined as mental illness. And this whole section of this video really got me onto my hobby horse. So I talk about that a lot more in the Discord, so come and join. Otherwise, I'll see you in part 5. Mwah! Bye-bye. For those of you who read Atomic Habits, you know that a 1% change compounds over time.